Hey, Lori, could you take a roll?
Christopher Abel.
Here.
Sid Hampson.
Here.
Matthew Phipps.
Present.
Stacy Selger. Here. Matthew Spalding.
Here.
Carrie Trask. Tony Vostelica.
Here.
Okay, and then we have lots of different policies for second read under the consent agenda. Anything anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion in a second to approve the consent agenda.
A motion.
Okay, motion by Spalding, second by Abel. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. We are continuing to table these two unfinished policies. We do have, did you want to, Jim did have a phone call with the WASB attorney. And we are going to set up a time to have him, he's put some dates out there. So we're moving forward with that, and we should have, hopefully.
We'll have a date nailed down, and then we'll also come back to identify questions you might have regarding, two broad categories of policies, the Title IX and First Amendment, and then questions that we might have. We obviously recognize we've been dealing with some policies, but to make sure that we're providing information so that he's prepared. He's providing the information. He's also suggested that we treat this more as a professional development for the board, recognizing the public will be there and that you might want to also get questions from them for the board. But he wants to make sure that it's if he's involved with the public, he's really working for the board and your development. He doesn't want to get in a situation where it has a response in the audience and all of a sudden that might be used against you. If you would take a certain position and they're saying the attorney told us, so he would see this as professional development where everybody is learning in terms of what you're learning and getting the background knowledge.
Okay.
I missed, when did you say you think that's good?
It's in March. I've got 6 dates that just from him today. And so the next process is picking a date. And that's why I'll work back to figure out how to do that. Get that date.
Okay, so we could then, should we learn something that would affect policy 2260 or 2266, we could go back and amend them then, correct? Because I'm a little chagrined to see this on the agenda every time. So I'd be perfectly happy to move that we approve these this evening.
Let's second that.
Second that, okay.
Say that again. I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
And I'll do it specifically this time because I didn't say a lot.
Okay.
Perfectly happy to move that we approve those two policies, 2260 and 2266, as presented this evening.
Okay, and there's a second by Biff. Any discussion about that?
I will be voting no just because of legal counsel.
Same with me.
Yeah, I think we really need to hear what the attorney has to say on it before we approve it. Doesn't make much sense for me to approve it now.
It's because we do have a current policy on it right now that is in place. It's a vote on whether or not to be changing it. So it's not like we're without the policy. Rushing it, I feel, is just unnecessary, but I understand.
Anyone else?
Well, just a comment. No matter what the attorney says at that meeting, based on what we talked about on Tuesday night, attorneys are going to have different opinions of what is right and what is wrong. So we are passing something from Neola, which I think about 360 some schools in the state of Wisconsin use. There's more than 1,500 schools in their organization that use this. If I'm going to get sued for a policy, I would rather have an organization that works with that policy and is in schools backing us up than if we go out on our own and develop a policy that doesn't have that backing. And as long as we're going to get sued either way, if something happens, and anybody can sue anything. Well, anybody can sue anybody for anything.
Yeah.
I know.
No laughing.
But it's true.
As long as it's there, I would go with the policy And if somebody wants to sue us because they don't like that policy, then that will go to court. But I would rather be protected by the view of the organization who does school law for 1,500 schools in this country.
Duly noted.
Yeah, Carrie.
I'd just like to know, I need a refresher on this. What's the big hang-up? What is the issue of these policies that is worth this stalling on?
I can explain a little bit. The policy, the proposal of changes is a proposal of changes that hasn't yet been made legal. Title IX, those changes have not gone through yet. So I was wondering, are we making this change ahead of time? Are we rushing that? Either way, if we were to go by exactly what it is in law right now, it would be pretty much what we have as far as the policy. But they are proposing that there's going to be more changes because of letters from the president and suggestions and things like that. So it's not technically law yet. So would we be jumping the gun? Are we making changes that are unnecessary yet? Like you said, we can revise them later on as well. But we were discussing because there are some controversial topics on it. So
I would also just say that we are using WASB. WASB also they write policies as well. So we could, if we ever wanted to, we could use Neola or WASB. So I don't see it as going against what Neola is saying because we're using the WASB attorney to come and to educate us. So I too, and Carrie, just to go back to your statement, one of the things that I had read about is, again, the government came out and made changes, but because of all the feedback that they got, they did not finish those changes. And now what the school law said is they are now pushing it to possibly coming out in March. The final, this is what it's going to be. So that is, so I also too would be voting no to work on this tonight. I'm happy to take these off of the agenda until we're actually going to do. I just didn't want them to get lost, so that's why I had them on here, so.
Our policy also suggested that they stay on. If you bring something, they stay on until you resolve it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why we kept them on.
Is there
Any,
is there anything in policy that says after we don't discuss it for 2 meetings, it falls off the tabled list? I thought I remember reading something. I could be wrong.
I do not know the answer to that.
I don't know without that, but I can check that.
And normally, if you table something, it remains tabled until you officially take it up and thoroughly defeat it.
Right.
And really, these have just been sitting there tabled.
Correct.
They haven't been voted up or down.
Yeah.
Okay, so all in favor of taking action on the 2 policies tonight signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Okay. Okay, so the consent agenda table policy is, actually I skipped ahead, report to superintendent. Jim, go ahead.
Yes, so we have a scheduled facilities assessment due in March, working with CISA 10, but we felt with the significance of what we're covering that was most important to bring you up to speed with how that's progressing through. So Mike Schwartz, I'd ask you to come up and introduce our CISA 10 people here, and then we have their update to you that they'll kind of go through. And then Angela has also provided some supporting financial information relative to considerations that will have to be made down the road.
I've had the opportunity to work with 2 of these gentlemen quite a bit, so I gotten to know them quite well with CSUB. So I'm going to let them do all of the talking tonight, and whatever questions you have, they can certainly answer all of them. I'll introduce them. This is John Burgett, and we have Nate Corral, and then Luke Schultz. So I'm just going to turn it over to them and let them present what they have, and then let the questions go. So,
Hello, everybody.
Oh,
Been a little while since we've been here, and we wanted to just give an update. To Mike's point, John and Nate have been very busy going in your building, so we'd like to give a brief update where we're at and some of the common themes that we've seen, and then get into some next steps. as we look at this, as Nate and John are going through some of this, I think it would be good to hold some of the questions until we get kind of done with the common themes part of it and go through the space. That way, I think they might answer some of your questions, but then when we get before into next steps, it would be good where we can go back and forth and answer any questions that you guys may have from there. But with that being said, Mr. Burgett, I will hand it over to you, sir.
Yeah, if we could take just a minute to go through the agenda. We're going to talk about the assessment progress that's been made, project prioritization. We've got two major categories there. Major safety concerns and also priority and common projects. We have collected a lot of information on space utilization, which is another piece of our assessment. And then we'll, as Luke and everyone has said, we'll have open questions at the end so we can cover anything that you people want to take on. Looking at assessment progress, we've been working since October. We actually started in this room with a kickoff meeting. All of the administrative team and executive team are here. Since that time, we've been traveling to every site. Mike had mentioned he's been along for the ride. So we've not only heard from a lot of district staff, we've also been with district staff as we went through a lot of these buildings and identified what we've identified. To date, we've been through all the sites. We've also captured a lot of the hard copy construction prints and have had those digitized for planning, measurements, and analysis. We've collected your energy use data, which is another piece in the assessment. I had mentioned the space data, which is already collected. We've still got some analysis to do. We've got a final report due date before the end of February of this year. And then we plan to have an ending presentation, much like this, but probably in more detail in March for the board. That's where we're at. Go to the next one. The assessment itself, it is one of those things where we look for the negatives. We're looking for areas that need improvement. So this isn't the type of a report where we're going to bring back all kinds of complementary things that we've identified. We've really concentrated on what does the district need from a facility standpoint, and what can we recommend is taken care of, along with the prioritization of those items. We've got a lot of information collected. One of the reasons we hope to have this preliminary meeting was to introduce some of the concerns that we have now. We're getting closer and closer to summer. Again, we really want to give you the advance notice of some of these items so that they can be covered this summer. And I do know that the list is such that it's going to take a number of years to cover the improvements we have identified so far through our assessment process. Looking at the prioritization, we call each of the improvements a facility improvement measure. The acronym is FIMS. We tend to use FIMS quite often as we're describing what we do in these assessments. Through the prioritization, we'll typically take those four categories that are identified on the slide: safety and health, lack of functional space, return on investment, and project cost. In the scoring, the higher the score, the higher the priority. Some of the items are a bit confusing. Safety, compliance, and health are pretty easy to understand. Functional condition is an estimate of how much usable life we would expect out of that item, component, or process that we've looked at. Return on investment, those are the items that if they're taken care of, they'll eventually pay for themselves in a relatively short period of time. Some items as quick as 2 years. Other items that we may identify with some return could be as long as 10 years. But again, short-term returns. And project cost, and I probably have the most questions on project cost. When we identify project cost as a low-cost item, it actually has a higher priority in our ranking. And the reason it's ranked that way is those dollars are typically more readily available, and it's something that you can usually take care of in pretty short order. So it does get a little bit higher number. With the ranking, we're able to sort all of the FIMS that we put together by site, by district, and also by type of FIMS. And it becomes a very good tool and a ready reference in developing your project list from year to year, and then also developing a strong long-range plan for your facilities. Let me turn the page here so I don't miss a note. We've actually seen so much in your district that we pulled out Maslow's pyramid as an example to put an additional prioritization scale in place. So those of you that are familiar with this pyramid, the foundational items or the most important items are at the bottom. And as you go through the steps up the pyramid, things become less and less important, but they also are there for needs of the facilities. So when we look at this at the bottom, the 01 level, we've identified health. And we've got items such as indoor air quality and HVAC items that we've identified as very important and foundational improvements that need to be taken care of in pretty short order. Again, one of the reasons we brought this meeting forward or asked for this preliminary meeting was to introduce some of this to you so it's not a surprise in March, a couple months ahead of school being out for the summer. Going up to the next step, safety, we also found a number of safety items that we feel should be looked at and concentrated on. So from our perspective and in our report, we've got some items that we're really putting an emphasis on and a higher priority, and then looking at the full range of other improvements that we've identified. To get an idea of some of the safety concerns that we have, I've got a couple slides. And again, these are just some of the concerns, just so you can see kind of the breadth of items that we look at for safety concerns. The first one, which I had mentioned before, was indoor air quality. There's a number of HVAC issues, some failed equipment. There's also a concern for identifying where the areas for asbestos and lead might be in your buildings. Another area of concern that was brought up numerous times in interviews and also appeared to be evident from our tours and inspections were traffic, the pedestrian crossings, and then also staff parking, and many of the drives around the schools appear to have some safety concerns associated with them. Another big area was structural. We looked at the pools. We looked at the Washington gym. We looked at the towers at Wilson and the high school. And we also identified a couple abandoned coal storage areas at the middle schools. You're probably all very much aware of those items, but again, they really stand out in our report and something we want to bring forward early. Just to continue with a few other items, egress was another concern. Stairwells, access to stairwells, the congestion in the Jackson cafeteria, and also the Jefferson Rotunda had some egress issues which are identified in our report. We did take out swimming pools as kind of a separate item. There were concerns with pool decking and bowls deteriorating, easily seen in the tunnel accesses around those pools. And there were also some heating, ventilating, and air conditioning concerns for the pool spaces. Operationally, we also identified a few things. Pool operators were not available. Again, a compliment to Mike. He's got a pool operator in place now, which is outstanding to have that position back in place and covering those pools. Confined spaces is an area that we do feel some work needs to be done, along with roof access and safety and student access and safety to some areas. I guess with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nate here to go through some other priority projects.
Sounds good. Thanks, John. So the next slide, titled District Priority Projects, there's a handful of items that really stood out as items that we felt shouldn't wait until March. The district should be aware of early, and these are projects that the districts themselves, the district yourselves, are able to get on top of now, if you'd like. Those items are the structural engineer evaluations. Sounds like that was approved on Tuesday, but structural engineering evaluations of certain areas in the pools and in Washington and in Madison as well. Environmental health safety plans, that is something really geared towards mainly asbestos, lead, radon, et cetera. But running projects over the last decade, something that slows you down in the project process. So getting a handle on your EHS plans and doing any abatement or preemptively that you can really save you in a short timeline summer project. The last slide, John went over some of these maintenance operation safety issues that were alarming to us. Basically, training is needed, safety equipment, procedures. John also mentioned the traffic issues. This is something that came up repetitively across our analyses at the different sites, but there's been a couple of different incidences with kids getting hit, and it was a concern of several different principals, for several different principals. Something that shouldn't be taken lightly when I think of risk and payouts that schools end up paying for much smaller items. So something I think we should get on top of quickly. And then as a part of some of these different items, traffic being one of them, if you're going to paint a city street, but we'll need some additional consulting design help. And all of these different items, these are all things that we are very accustomed to doing. Love to be able to help the school with it if you so choose. CESA 10 has our own EHS department, for instance. But moving on, we're going to go into some of the common projects. And to not bore you to death and go through each one of these in detail, I really would love to have questions after we're done or after this part. So anything that stands up, much more important dialogue comes from questions than from me acting. So I'll just go through them quickly and talk about a couple. So everything on the next two slides are things that we saw in multiple facilities, typically most, sometimes all, but more than a couple of facilities. So it's a common issue throughout the district and things that we're not accustomed to seeing doing these audits for so long. I mentioned the student drop-off, pickup, traffic, pedestrian concerns. After we get through these common projects, I'll talk a little bit about where we're at in our space study. Just generalizing, by and large, the district, you have lots of space, you have extra space. The one case where I would say that's not true is in eating space in the elementary level. So Riverview is the only school with a lunchroom, and none of the others do. And it was noted, it was seen firsthand, you're having gym in you're having gym class in half of the lunchroom, lunch in the other half. The picture here is Jackson, something close to 90 kids in a classroom designed for 30, not a good situation. Tech Ed spaces in the community that we're in, Tech Ed is something that this district should shine in, and you currently are not. Middle school Tech Ed is in rough shape, very rough. High school is not a lot better. So a common deficiency. Then you get into some of the more common things. Big district like this, plenty of asphalt and landscaping and playground work that needs to be done. I'm a HVAC guy. The state of the HVAC in general in the district is, I've never seen it. It's bad. There's many schools that it's just unoperable. We're commonly doing whole building HVAC renovations from schools in the 70s, 80s, where I'm finding a lot of equipment in place, some not running that should be from the 30s, 40s, 50s. So HVAC and plumbing, found plenty of schools with plumbing issues. That's common for the age of some of these facilities and expensive to dig up for. I have air conditioning on the list, just something to be on the board's mind. Another not common thing we see most schools being air conditioned nowadays, and in general you have none. But also in general, getting air conditioning into old buildings is a costly endeavor. Electrical services, generators, a lot of it original equipment, plenty of issues with elevators. Riverview and the high school, Jefferson, all had elevator issues. Next page, similar stuff. The picture, the picture is Wilson Tower. But here's a case where tuck pointing is no longer an option, but just extremely common where I'm doing roof assessments and a lot of the building is sitting on the roof. Many schools, windows completely failing, outdated walls, doors. Then you get to the inside, not as uncommon given the vintage of the buildings, but a 100-year-old building or a 75-year-old building has trouble with its walls, floors, ceilings, etc. And then the rest of the list, pretty common stuff. Lighting, not common to see fluorescent lighting much anymore in schools. That's throughout the district. Cameras, fire alarm systems, PA systems, Wi-Fi. These are all things we heard again and again going through the different assessments. And then the ADA concerns, not, again, given the age and vintage of your buildings, American with Disabilities Act, 1990, so anything pre-1990 is not going to be there. Just expensive projects to deal with. You don't have to, you're making accommodations in most cases. You don't have to deal with that until you renovate, and then you got to bring it to today's date. So sorry to go so long. You want me to go through space before we take questions?
I think that was a lot of information right there. Before we get into the space side and questions on the space side, I think this would be a good time to open it up of just with the facility audit, with the findings and the common themes. Do you guys have any questions for the gentleman? I know that was a lot of information. Yeah, Tony.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate you guys putting this all together. Nate, if I heard you right, it sounded like we have extra space in the elementary schools, but just not in the lunchrooms. Did I hear that right?
You did. I'll talk a little bit more in detail in a second, but you did. And that's kind of, we're halfway through this, but that's what we're saying.
So how do you address that? I mean, and I guess, was that just like a poor design, or I guess the buildings are.
I mean, the long answer would be getting into the vintages and ages of how we were building things in the 20s, 30s, 50s. You have basically every vintage there is every decade.
Yeah.
High school is, an average normal room in a K through 12 is 900 square feet. High school will have 600 square foot classrooms, which is very, very small. It'll have 1,300 square foot classroom, which is very, very large. And you see that through all Jackson, Franklin, both middle schools, high school, all the older facilities.
But to elaborate on that a little bit, is back then you saw a lot of school districts that combined their lunch space with their phy-ed space. So in most cases, when you look at a lot of older buildings, you have your curtain that goes down because you don't have enough time and you got to keep having your gym class. So you have gym on half, your cafeteria's on the other half, and to get away from that is to expand and either add a cafeteria or a gym. In most cases, most schools, because you're always lacking gym space, that's usually a direction they're going.
I don't know, talk about it sounded like a horror story on the heating, the plumbing, and the lighting. I mean, what are we talking about here in terms of, do things just have to be gutted and replaced, or how big an undertaking is that, and what kind of money are we talking about?
I'd hate to speculate too much at this point, but that's the question. And, you get into the conversations of what's worth saving, what's worth not saving. We are there, I would think, in a lot of cases. But renovating buildings in that pre-50 era in the way they're built, you still have, on HVAC, you still have 4 buildings heated with steam. It's just not something.
Well, some of that steam, we get that from
For the high school.
utilities.
For the high school.
Yeah, for the high school, yeah.
But not something you really see at all anymore. Just
Yeah.
expensive endeavors to break into those older buildings and renovate them.
Yeah, Lincoln High School is 100 years old.
Yep.
Yeah.
As you start diving into it, you don't know the condition of the pipes that,
Right.
until you get into it, but.
I was at Oxford University one summer. I wasn't studying there. I was just, just admiring. And the librarian was talking about trying to put computer stuff into the library that was built in the 16th century. And I think we're almost doing that we'll be doing that sort of same thing with Lincoln, I suppose.
Yeah, most systems on paper all have an estimated useful life, and that can be expanded with good maintenance. We haven't seen that much at all, but there really isn't anything on those lists that's beyond 30, 40 years besides concrete and brick walls.
Yes, sir. Yeah, you point out that we really have to look at traffic, both foot and vehicle patterns at all of our schools. Our schools were all built in a way that presumed not just neighborhood schools, but neighborhood schools where the bulk of the students walk. So they were not built for a high amount of vehicle traffic picking up and dropping students off. I'm sure you're aware of that. So my question would be, in addition to signage, are you going to have more fairly complete suggestions about how we could revise the approaches to our schools for ways that facilitate parental pick up and drop off, or are you just pointing out it's bad?
Yes.
I love that answer. That's how I would answer it if I was in business.
The way I would answer that is kind of into that priority projects slide.
If kids are getting hit, it's a priority.
Exactly. So I think, I hate to use the word Band-Aid, you can make things a lot better, I think fairly cost effectively in the near term, because you have to. And it will also show the community that you care about this problem. As far as reinventing the wheel on traffic at all of your sites, I would want to go further down the path of what I was alluding to, of how this school district needs to look in 5, 10, 20 years before we made major pickup drop-off changes.
Will you guys be giving us a recommendation of options, like, we would suggest based on this that you consider consolidating your buildings into having X number of buildings versus this, or definitely keeping this space because it has X, Y, and Z, and that, in transitioning, is that what we're to expect, that we would see some of that?
From our initial assessment, we're really looking at providing recommendations to correct the existing condition that's there.
Okay,
Your description went kind of beyond that into the
Right.
future, saying, what else should we do to really wrap this up? Very astute on your part, or the board's part, you understand that that's part of why we're here, is we've got a summer coming, and what things can we think about and what things shouldn't we think about, because the long-range plan hasn't been developed, or we haven't decided on those items. The district priority projects that Nate mentioned, those are projects that the district needs to really concentrate on outside of this assessment report. So if I use your traffic as an example, you're gonna need a designer of some type to stay compliant, just the legality. You're also gonna need to work with the city.
Right.
And it's very hard for us to sit after a walkthrough and suggest how that's accomplished, because that's a challenge, but it's something that's gonna need to take a focus, concentrated effort, by the district. Another item that we identified was the environmental health and safety plans. Again, you've got surveillance and all of the usual things happening that need to happen, but what is the overall plan to eliminate some of those hazards that have been here for so long? And again, the cost associated with it is really significant. Maintenance and operational safety procedures and equipment. Again, there's things that we saw that, maybe there's a piece of equipment that could be added. There's definitely some procedure that needs to change to make things a little safer. Architect procurement for complex films. That kind of gets back to the space. Okay, we've got these buildings, we've got X amount of space left. where could we carve out that space for that lunchroom? You know, as things have progressed and you've added some nice gymnasium spaces, the finishes in those gyms were not designed for multipurpose. It was designed for a gym, and the lunchroom ended up in there. Where if you went back 20 years, you probably would have had a multipurpose cafeteria, gymnasium, cafetorium, whatever, and those surfaces would be for both uses. Not a competitive gym, probably not even a training or practice gym for a high school sport, but it would be designed for both. We don't have that, so there's some recommendations that kind of go with that, but they're big items. So there's going to need to be well, quite a bit of discussion and thought and work to knock some of these things out.
Thank you guys for what you've done so far. I think what you've just answered kind of way what's happening is when you present a problem or a challenge, or you did what we asked you to and give us an audit, state of affairs, somehow you got to come up with a solution in the same sentence. So that is very hard, but thank you for answering that the way you did. I'm very excited to hear about the pedestrian traffic movement, because I think that's a great way we can improve things quite quickly. And then, you know, you said that you could work with an architecture firm, or you could do some of that in-house, but to kind of go down the road and think about how we can really improve the flow of our children and the pickup, drop off, and then you had a great point about the dating of when it was made. So that's really, really exciting. I just wanted to compliment you guys what's happened so far, but understand that, yeah, your solutions, you don't have to give a solution for everything. You're just trying to tell us where we're at right now. So I do understand the complexity of telling us the problem but not having the solution right away. But I wanted to know, or you need to know, what lens you're looking at it through. Is it a 1-year solution, a 2-year solution, or a 10-year solution? And I think wrestling with, now that we have the identified problems, and then with what you're going to talk about next in your report of utilization, I think that's going to really, really drive the timeline. And you guys know this already, but to articulate that to the board about how we want to go and try to figure out where we're going to put our efforts to get a 1-year, a 5-year, or a 15, 20-year return. So thank you.
All set. Yes, Tony. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. It sounds like the final deliverable is going to have all the issues that you guys have identified, and are we going to get a recommendation for each one of those on how to handle that? Okay.
Yeah. There'll be a description of what we consider the deficiency.
Yeah.
And then there'll be a recommendation. And it was interesting when I was listening earlier, consider, quite often there's a consider this statement that goes with that recommendation, because it might be, paint the wall, but it might be consider replacing that wall, versus maintaining it, those kinds of things. And that goes on and on and on. Then there's a ranking. So you're able to go through those 4 prioritization rankings that we look at. We provide an estimated cost, but again, what recommendation you take is going to drive that cost. I mean, you could do a 50-year improvement, or you can do a 5-month improvement.
Would it be possible to, and I don't know if this is in your scope or not, but maybe if you come across a scenario like that, right, where there's multiple routes we could take, which I would imagine would probably apply to, a lot of what you're looking at. Would it be possible to see maybe a good, better, best scenario, or here's kind of like the quick fix, but here's the pros and cons of each approach that,
we can do that, but there's going to be so many films that we're really hoping that you and the administrative team can hone in on some of the main films as well that you want us to look at. Because how many films do you think we'll have?
1,000.
1,000? I mean, it's going to be a lot.
Yeah.
And of that, a lot of them are fairly insignificant, but some of them are pretty major. And we're really here today saying those major ones, if you identify them like we identify them as important, we really should get on those and start working on them. Just to continue with that ranking and the way that FIM is laid out, we have the prioritization, we have our price estimate. The last column is where we'll typically put in a red, yellow, or green. Red meaning 1 to 2 years, yellow, maybe 3 to 5 years, and red after 5 years. But again, if you've got long-range plans to make changes in which buildings you're operating, or maybe even moving some of the activities in buildings, that can disrupt some of that long-range estimates that we have on our sheet. But it's a very easy line to go across and identify what we recommend, an estimated cost, and what is the time priority. And that's really the issue, is we've got a lot of FIMs, we've got time restraints, and we've got financial restraints. And pushing all of those together and coming up with what are we going to do next summer, what are we going to do next year, what are we going to do after that is a lot of work.
So if I heard you right, and refresh my memory, and I'm sorry if I missed this, PIMS, is that facility improvement measure?
Yeah, that's an improvement, a deficiency that
All
we
right.
recommend to improve.
That final report, it's gonna have about 1,000 of those, and we're gonna basically have to decide, are we gonna have a range of like, I just want a kind of high level idea of what it would cost if we addressed all of it.
Yep.
That's probably not.
I'll give you an example. You've got fluorescent lighting in almost all your buildings.
Right.
So every building has that as the FIM.
Right.
Replace fluorescent with LED.
Sure.
So in that report, we can grab that FIM, bundle it, and now you've got a district-wide issue that knocked out 6 FIMs, not just one.
Okay.
And I think we have a lot of repetition
We do.
when we go from school to school. But again, we have to kind of slice and dice it with what time's available.
When
what
we
money's
come to
available.
March, it's gonna be in the next 2 to 5 years. Here's
Exactly.
maintenance needs that you need to look at. Next 5 to 10 years, here's maintenance needs that you need to look at. And so there's gonna be some large dollars associated with those. And then that's where, when we get after the space utilization, we need to Matt's point, really look at those next steps, because depending on your big picture, those change, right? So if we're looking at an elementary school, we're talking about traffic options. You can have your glorified, here's the gold option, this is gonna fix everything. And that could be a large dollar amount, because now you're doing asphalt and you could be redoing things in and out. Or we might be doing some bigger things here to this building in the next 3 years. Let's do some traffic signs here and update some crosswalks. But let's not do the $5 million option if we might be doing something different to that building. So those are those bigger conversations that we need to have after we start delivering that report. And that's why we're meeting today at kind of the halfway point of, there's a lot of stuff here that we need to look at, and there's going to be a lot of conversations of what direction you guys want to go and what makes sense for the Manitowoc School District. Yes, ma'am.
The state of affairs, how I group them, you might have grouped them differently. I call high school, middle schools, elementaries. Are they consistent with the condition at those 3 levels? Or are there different facilities in a lot worse condition than others? Do you understand my question?
I do.
Yeah.
They're definitely consistent at the middle school, high school level. They're consistent at some of the elementary school levels.
Okay, so let's dive into that a little more if we have the time. The elementary schools, worst condition overall to best condition overall, which two? Yeah.
We are halfway done.
Okay.
I definitely can see the Monroe, I would say, is the best school you have. I think Stangl, for its use at the moment, has a lot of opportunity.
So that's, once you get into utilization, I have some more comments about that.
Sure. Riverview's a wonderful site. Jefferson, of course, as a facility, is your best facility. It's built in 1995, which makes it 30 years old, but it's your best facility. It's just in a tight spot. It needs a lunchroom, and it's tough seeing where it goes right today.
So you've all told me good things about the elementaries, so which, the only ones that are
All the
left are
rest.
probably not the best. Okay, thank you.
Jim, I saw your hand up, sir. Do you have?
No, I think we're getting into this. The question that you're talking about, what's your long-range plan? It's obviously there's all kinds of options, and put as much money as you want into this school or another option.
Yep, we'll go through the space side of it, and then I'll kind of dive into that next of just schedule and just have an open conversation with that, so you can help guide us of what you guys are feeling in your direction, so we can be on the same page as we look at this, because I know these two to my right, and they got engineering brains and they're going crazy trying to think of all these options, but I always like to come back of, we need to have the same vision as you guys as we're looking at those options, because there's so many different directions you can go.
I was running some quick numbers the other day about the district, thinking about what should have been budgeted for maintenance over the years annually. I came up with a number of about 500 to 600 million of what it would cost to replace your 10 schools' existing square footage. That's just a number that I thought was interesting. Tony, one thing I wanted to answer about your question as well. At the end of what John's been explaining of our matrix, we put forward what's called a strategic plan, which separates these FIMs into categories. At this district, there'd probably be a less than 12-month category also, but a 12-month, a 2-year, a 3 to 5, those would be arranged in their own spreadsheet with the total at the bottom. So that information will be, I think what you're asking for will be there.
Yeah, and thanks for that color. So that 500 to 600 million estimate, it's ballpark you threw out there, was that to like tear everything down and start over, or just?
No, I just took your total square footages, and I think I put $450, maybe I used 500, but a common budgeting new construction cost towards it. Yeah, and then I was thinking about maintenance, and you usually assume, I've heard lots of different, 1 to 5% of your total replacement value as an annual maintenance budget.
So would we be able to know I mean, I know we got some old buildings, right? And I'm just curious, will you guys be able to recommend at the end of this, like, do you think it's feasible to just kind of maintain what we got, or do you think it's going to be one of those things where we got to just kind of blow it up and start over at some of these?
I think we're not at that spot right now. I think that there's going to be, that's the exact conversation that needs to take place here. That there's some facilities that are in terrible shape, and that needs to be discussed. It's all going to come up to appetite for budget in the end.
We do know, though, with walking through some of the buildings, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, though, there is gonna be some tough decisions where you do have enough maintenance needs. Is it maintenance needs, or do we do something else with this building? But there's gonna be tough questions with that, and just by walking through, there's gonna be some buildings that, with your maintenance needs.
One of the comments in our conversation that comes up is you obviously don't want to have us in a situation that we invest something significantly and 2 years down the road, we say, no, we should have done this, and then you're throwing some money away. I mean, that's the challenge when you start looking at options.
That's why we want to be on the same vision as you, so when you're looking at next steps and projects, you don't want to sit and pause. If you're looking to do something bigger down the future, you still want to keep maintaining those things, and especially safety and security, so.
Can I real quick just add, for me, what would be helpful to have that conversation is if I could have an idea of, I have an idea now of like, hey, if we just hit reset and rebuild everything, what that would look like. What would it look like if we just restored or maintained what we had, right? And is that like half that, or a quarter of that, or 3/4, right? I don't know. So I'm just throwing that out there as something that would be helpful for us to
Kind of extremes, you mean?
Well, maybe not the two extremes, but maybe just I guess you could consider them extremes, but I would think the practical approach, if it's viable, is to just kind of patch what we have, just make sure it's functional. But if they're so old, I used to live in an old house, so I know what a can of worms that could be. I'm glad we got out of that, but that's why I'm just trying to understand, from a long-term perspective, looking at the total cost of ownership and everything else that's involved, what's going to be the best decision for the district. That's really what I'd like to get out of this process at the end of it. It's just, good information and data that will allow us to make the right decision for our taxpayers.
To get you that additional information to make the right decision, that's one of the reasons we identified a structural engineer. Because it doesn't really do us much good to say, well, we think you can restore it, and then find out that structurally you can't. And there may even be some compliance issues that are with that too. Another good example that we've talked about was the abandoned cold rooms. They're underneath the parking lot. Do you fill them with a low-cost cement? Well, not if you're going to redo that parking lot next year. You've got, a 10 by 10 foot roof, block of cement that you have to handle and chop back out. there's things like that that sequentially get in the way of each decision as you go forward. I think and Angela put her out front, the cost and what's available dollar-wise is gonna be real significant in making those final decisions. It won't only, it won't only be the conditions that we identify or recommend. It truly is what can you afford and what time have you got to make that correction. So all those pieces kind of have to come together, but the report will be very valuable in supporting that whole decision-making process.
Tony, I wanted to also add, part of the question that you asked gets into, there's basically, in my mind, two different styles of renovating. So what this report will give you in March is how to fix everything. So that's one cost, and there's some buildings that are in bad shape, but fixing your buildings in a state where they will no longer leak, the windows will be replaced, you'll have new floors and new ceilings and new paint, and the boilers will work, et cetera, et cetera. That's one cost. Taking that same building and blowing it apart and adding rooms, 21st century learning environments, et cetera, that's a different cost, and that cost gets close to build new real quick or beats it. So the facility assessment deliverable kind of tells you what to do to fix your existing buildings, and then part of the decision on the board's part is, do we want to stick with the learning environments that we have now? These 50s and 40s and 30s and 20s buildings.
So we'll dive into the space analysis here and then get into the next steps too, as I think that will help get into some of those other questions that you guys are looking at as well.
Sounds great. Okay, so as a part of our deliverable with the facility assessment, we're also doing what we call a space needs analysis. So far, I've compiled every classroom in the building, every in the district, basically every space in the building, and I know the square footage of each one of those rooms. What else have we done? Looked at birth rates, looked at enrollment trends. Those will be the next couple slides, probably information you're very familiar with. But what's in front of you is the combined elementary square footage numbers. And so from 40,000 feet, this says, and this, by the way, does not include Stangle. This says that you have about 14 rooms in the entire K through 5 spectrum of available space in the existing elementaries. Also to know, this is only elementary classrooms that are currently being used as elementary classrooms. So a general comment we've seen throughout the district, more so, maybe more so at the elementary level, is we see a lot of inefficient use of space. That would be specifically, I would gear it towards what I've seen for the SFA program or special ed. A lot of times where full-size classrooms are being used for education or different, what's my word? Different parts of your process of your operation that wouldn't need a full-size classroom, I guess. So
It's being used because it's a room,
yeah,
but it's a much bigger room
Yeah.
than what it needs to be.
Right.
Right?
yes, sir. The next 2 or 3 slides are all just enrollment numbers. I'm guessing the board has seen a lot of this stuff, but the first is combined elementary from the last 5 years. To me, the takeaway here, you've lost about 300 kids over the last 5 years. Those kids that were in kindergarten in 2019 are now in 4th. So that decline in general should continue to steepen out through the middle school and high school at the next couple of, over the next 5 years. Sometimes this is worth seeing, sometimes it's not. Birth rates in the county look very much similar to that graph over this graph looks very similar even for school enrollment. If you take it back to 20 previous years, birth rates follow that. Birth rates seem to have leveled here, and we use that at times to project into the future for enrollment. That works pretty well in a rural setting. In an urban setting, two things affect that. Well, in Manitowoc, two things affect that. Immigration affects that everywhere, so that can jump city to city and change what birth rates are doing. In Manitowoc, you have, as you know, a huge parochial footprint, so parents have a lot of choices. I guess I'm saying is, we don't know what we're saying. We think that enrollment should level, but that's a, what do they say, a dartboard. Yeah, you can see it.
Which one is which, the two lines, because I didn't see a key.
I think the dotted line is just averaging, correct?
Yes.
Correct, yeah. That's just the mean.
Okay.
Yep.
Can we walk back a little bit on that previous slide? Can you explain to me, because I'm just not understanding the combined elementary recommendations?
Sure.
Can you just walk through? So let's do first grade. So you're saying that district-wide testing, we have 16 rooms. Recommended is what? 352 what?
Kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
For capacity, you're saying.
Correct, and that's a good question. I don't have my spreadsheet up in front of me, but I think I know it's in my head. For K through 1, we use 22, I think.
Ratio, you're saying?
For classroom, and for 2 through 5, we use 25.
That's not pertinent to this exact question, but I understand what you're trying to say.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, so you're saying recommended for 16 rooms, you'd have 352 students, and then what we have is actually 309.
Correct.
Okay, so we are actually over abundant of classrooms per each one.
Yeah, it's saying you have space for 43 more first graders in your existing situation right now. I'm not saying, that might be 3 at Riverview and 2 at Franklin.
And then you just also said that now with SFA, we have classrooms that could be smaller size-wise, but they're nice and beautiful and big now.
Yeah, SFA is a different animal and I think needs to be looked into closer. What I saw, SFA coordinator position where you have a classroom basically full of books and one person not really being utilized. You have a lot of very large libraries in all of your elementaries, except for one. Elementaries are just not being used like they were anymore. So I see that as space available. But I just think SFA might likely be able to be managed differently. It eats up a lot of space for a very short amount of time, and that's usually opportunity. So a couple hours in the day, it's booked because you're sending kids all over. I think there's a way to expand that. What you were saying about when you first started talking, that's what we saw more so in special ed, where you'd have a one-on-one in a classroom.
Big class.
Yeah.
Now I understand the term.
Middle school and high school is next. Just similar charts on the downward trend, not nearly as drastic in the total number of kids because it's a smaller snapshot of 6 through 9 here. Plus, I think it's 100 on the middle school over that 5 years. And 65, yes, 150 and then 100 or so. Yeah, I think over the same amount of time. I've talked long enough. But I don't want to stop talking if anyone has questions. That's the only way we get it.
You guys are aware we moved the 9th graders up to Lincoln?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
I just want to make sure that's understanding to this.
So I have up here, and kind of, you guys have brought up some good conversations, and this is just very rough at this point, but why we really wanted to meet today is there's a couple different things, and we wanted to open this conversation up larger to collect where you guys were at. For example, Tony, you were bringing up, are we looking at doing maintenance for the next 10 years to try to keep these buildings, or are we looking bigger picture here? And that causes a few things here too. I know Tuesday night you guys were discussing looking at an owner's rep agreement with us But that's where we just want to keep on your guys' forefront of, you might be planning something here, and what are you planning for? Are we looking for that, do we want to do maintenance? Or are we looking bigger picture and want to set the district up for the next 20 plus years? Because those avenues are totally different in how you go down that. But at the same time, that's not a picture that's going to happen in the next 2 years, where it's good to not just let your buildings sit. If you could be tackling some things that are good to get done, that's what that agreement was for, is to look at these next 2 years, while at the same time, you're planning for that bigger picture as well. And I know, Tony, you brought it up to help with that picture, right? You're gonna wanna see a facility audit, and I wanna see, okay, next 5 years, we're looking at X dollars. Next 5 to 10, we're looking at X dollars, and you will have that. And where we're coming from at this point, and where we wanted to meet with you midterm, is there's a lot here. And that conversation needs to start happening soon. And why we say happening soon is because when you're looking at just bigger picture, you want to do that in a year in advance to start planning for something. And before you start planning for something in a year in advance, you got to have all of your ducks in a row of what direction are we going? Have your procurement in place for, are we looking at if it's any new construction or renovation? You got to have those designs and concepts in place. And where we're at and the size of your district, that's about a 2-year process to do that and get your ducks in a row. And that's where we're here tonight, to open that conversation up. When we come to March, it'll be a detailed cost and show you what we need to do with your current buildings. But that doesn't give you the direction of, okay, we're gonna go this way and we're gonna set it up for the next 20 years, or are we gonna go the next 5-6 years and do maintenance and push it down the road? And every district's different, environment is different, so that's where strategically we wanna see what you guys are thinking and where your vision is, so we can keep planning and moving forward. I know there's been a lot of information that's been thrown at you.
One thing I'd say is oftentimes we're in a situation where, I'll just use an example because it's easier. A school district wants us to add a gym to their facility. And throughout that 1.5-year process of doing that, we find lots of other problems in their existing facility, whether they did that with referendum dollars or they did that with budget dollars. The step that you took to get a facility assessment done first, that's the right step. So we end up doing a facility study after we've already spent a bunch of money, and we find, we shouldn't have been building a gym, we should have been fixing the roof at the elementary school. So it's good to have this information.
As we look at this first, I'll start with the next couple of years. Are you guys in agreement with, as we look at this in bigger picture, that we want to keep moving forward and doing some projects in the next couple of years? And with that being said, do you have any questions with that, or what that looks like and how we do that? I can go through that and explain in more detail of how we can assist with that. I know you guys have, yes, sir.
Yeah, I guess from my seat, just looking at this from a financial perspective, what I want is a recommendation that's gonna center around the total cost of ownership for the district, right? Because we could dink and dunk our way through this and probably have it cost us less near term, but we all know that sometimes that could end up costing you more in the long run, right? Just by not being more proactive. So that would be what I would request, or the view I would say is, hey, what's going to make the most financial sense for the district looking at the next 20, 30 years? Because ultimately, if we're going to make that kind of investment, I think we owe it to ourselves and the taxpayers to make sure that we've thoroughly evaluated what's going to be the best deal for them in the long run. If that makes sense.
It does. Yep.
Yeah, so I guess even if it might cost a little bit more to do something now than a Band-Aid solution, right? I would want to know that. If the the 20 or 30-year outlay is gonna be better that way, right? So that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And obviously, I don't speak for my peers, but I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, I was gonna say that, you know, I think the reason we invested in this process is because we haven't even been dinking and dunking, right? I mean, we've been dinking and dunking, but not as much as we needed to. So I think that there's, you know, on my part, I think that I want to know what we need to do in the interim, but the biggest thing to me is what are we going to do long-term? Number one, that we always have facility dollars to maintain what we have, whether we fix it or don't, that's part of our budget every year. And it's a reasonable amount of money that we, you know, not, I mean, I think we, you know, 325 or, you know, we know that that's not enough, especially for the size of our district and the aging of our buildings. So, I mean, I guess I would like to know what we need to do in the interim to be safe and everything like that, but I don't want to throw good money after bad. And so I want the truth. I want the truth that this building, you can invest X amount in it to keep it blah, blah, blah. But, you know, in 5 years, it's only going to last that long. So when you talked about, you know, need a roof or whatever, right? I mean, it has this life, and if you do it now, okay, great, it's going to get you here. But you know, so I just feel like I don't have enough information about those priorities and everything and that's why it's like, we need to have the information to know what to do that makes most sense.
Go ahead.
So what type of arrangement or agreement could we venture into on a solution-based manner? Meaning, you're not auditing now, that's completed after March, but now your solutions to issues with the scope of each facility, location, planning, what kind of relationship could you offer for that?
Yep. And so that was that owner's rep agreement. And to be clear, to back up a little bit, the reason why we brought that for informational base is just to look at, if you are looking at projects this summer that you need assistance on, you want to start moving pretty quickly. The summer's going to be here soon. Contractor schedules are filling up, and it's just more cost effective the sooner you can get to that to bid it. But to answer your question, with that owner's rep agreement, there's things, for example, the structural engineering proposals that you guys reviewed the other night. Typically, that would be outside of what our facility audit agreement would be, and going to do that. Where that owner's rep agreement, there's two different things. We're tracking some of that stuff where we need your expertise, whether it's just labor time. So whatever these guys do, spend on that, it would just be a monthly labor T&M cost for that. And if there's projects that are associated that you would like our assistance, we can, depending on what you need for our assistance, there's some districts that we need you to help us bid it out, get the procurement, help us into a contract phase, and then we can manage it. There's other projects that the districts we want you to bid it out and we want you to manage it. And so with that agreement that we put out there was more of, okay, let's say there's a couple traffic, fix those coal in the basements. Let's say that's a direction you guys wanted to go. Then we could assist you with just those projects that you would need assistance with, which you could be doing several other things on the side. But whatever projects you needed assistance with, we could help you. And that would be on, essentially, we charge our labor time. And then there's a percentage over the project cost, which covers for our computers and our cars and just our expenses, everyday expenses.
Only
If that helps.
only the projects we're assisting with.
Only the projects that we are working
To
on.
be clear, that's not what the agreement had listed. It was arching over just a 2-year span. It didn't have a scope.
We didn't have a scope because we didn't know what to
That's
put in
why
there
I'm
right now.
asking what I'm asking, and that's why you're answering what you're answering. right now.
Yeah, it was more informational based, so that way, let's say 2 weeks from now, when we sit down and we're having some visits and it comes down to, we know we're not gonna be messing with these buildings. Here's 10 things that we can do. We can do these 5 on our own. We'd really like you to help us with these 5. And then we could get rolling on that and help you as soon as you're ready to go. But just looking for stuff this summer, you'll want to get moving pretty soon.
I thought when Matt was asking a question, I felt like he was also asking about strategic master planning. What should be-
Well, that, he answered it at T&M, and then obviously scope on each project listed. And you would use that operation agreement, or what you
Owner's
said,
rep, yeah.
owner's rep. But you'd have a clear scope.
Yep. So it'd be, for example,
And that might come in every couple months of different scopes. Not just an arching one.
yeah, usually it's, so this fiscal year, we're gonna do roofs at Lincoln and we're gonna do the lighting and the windows at Lincoln. And so that would be, we'd amend the contract, that would be in the scope. The reason we just put in there that we could do this for 2 years. So there's some districts where we do it, where we amend it every single year of, okay, we got 500,000 this year, this is what we wanna spend it on. This year we got $1 million, this is what we wanna spend it on, and we need your help to do this. So that can be amended to what you guys want to do each year, and there might be a summer where you're good, and there might be a summer where there's a larger project. But that is just for your summer projects. If you're looking at next steps in this timeline here that we just kind of put rough together, that would be a separate agreement to help you with the planning side if you're looking for a larger picture at the end of this.
You mentioned financial numbers. Would you be open to having a allotted amount of resources that you would be allocated towards per fiscal year? Say, you just said we have 500,000 this year. We could allocate 500,000 in your purview to work through projects at this district.
Yes.
Have you done that before?
That's usually how it works. So we got $2 million. These are our projects. And then you prioritize them because you don't know obviously until you bid them out where they come in, and you bid them out, and let's say the roofing and the lighting all fits within that 2 million, and then we move forward.
I'm just saying, if you have a clear, distinct understanding of what your scope is, so say you're allocated X amount, and then you can work within that, and once it goes over that, then that's a part of that's the district side of it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I don't. Do you guys?
It would be an add-on.
Are you talking our labor time, like a not to exceed?
Yeah, I'm saying overall expenses of what you're allocated to
If
the
you had a
agreement.
If you had a $500,000 set of projects, that would be what we're allocated and what we're allowed to work with.
Yep.
If we did that and we identified those projects and we completed those projects, if it came in less than that, that money would be the district's. If we were managing those projects and we came up to that number, we would come to the district and say, we're at the 500,000, what would you like to do? Because then we can value engineer down, or we can push forward if that's what you decide to do. We're very open.
I'll break it down for you because I think you're talking
I'm
more.
talking a
on our-
little bit different.
I think you're talking our fees. So let's say
Yeah, I'm talking about
we're
overall.
gonna do a
arching
roofing
fees.
project. The roofing project at Lincoln's gonna be, we're gonna estimate it 500,000. We would have our percentage over that, and then their labor time to manage
Yes,
that.
that
So
would be
that's-
separate.
So that roofing project is gonna take a month.
Yep.
They would have labor time, we bill on a monthly basis, so they put on 10 hours in June, then you would get an invoice for,
You're quite understanding what I'm trying to
I do.
achieve. I'm trying to save money for the district.
Yes.
By utilizing funds for the district to use as much projects as possible. And when we need help and we need services, but we do not want to be paying on materials or on other projects and then giving you 2.5% of that.
that's ridiculous.
Well, that's what was written in the contract presented on Tuesday. So I understand that Nexus did the same thing, which I don't believe is in the best interest of the district, because we have amazing staff and an amazing administrative team that they can take care of some of the things in-house.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to give it a ball of wax.
Yeah, we would be pretty, when we amend the contract, the scope's very clear right in there, this is what we're working with, and whatever you guys are doing elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't know if it's been said or not, but Mike and ourselves, we were just talking about this at dinner before. We have not sat down, and Mike will be the one that determines, we want your help on X, we can handle Y. We have not had those conversations, and that's something, if you do want to help with small projects over the next couple of years, that Mike will be making the calls on.
I just want your fee schedule to be clear as ours is clear to you.
Yes, absolutely.
Any other questions or
I think,
statements?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Just looking down the road here, just kind of anticipating some of the costs of this thing. If we were to eventually consider looking at or pursuing a referendum, a capital referendum for any of the improvements, I see that on the timeline here. Is that something you guys could help with on the planning side, or what would that look like?
Great question. Yes, we can. And I feel we'd be a great fit for you guys. We call that our project development agreement. And we're not an architect and we're not an engineer. And we bring those entities in as needed. And so essentially we can guide you through that process from the beginning to the end. With the planning side of a PDA, we help you with all the marketing efforts. We put those documents together. We help with the campaign side of it. Essentially, we're right in your back pocket guiding you through that process, helping with cost estimates, helping you financially with your financial advisor and putting those costs together and what that picture would look like. But with the size of this, that's where we say when you look at our timeline, as I go back up there, that would be a good question for you guys and would also help us. And I think it would also help the executive team of just what, if you are looking at that, what would be your window? For example, we have up there the April of 26 to do that, year of 26. So if you're looking at the April of 26, we need to start moving here soon. And the reason why I say that is you might want to start moving before the facility audit is delivered in March. And the reason why I say that is getting your procurement and your design, there's going to be a lot of detailed conversations with that, to your point of this elementary school, we're going to have to put $20 million into it in the next 3 years. Does that make sense? Or should we be looking elsewhere? Or bigger picture? Then they can help with, you add on to this elementary school, or you build a new one and you take these two away. Those are conversations that need to happen within the next few months to get that ball rolling. But absolutely, I feel we could help you and do a great job with that. And then on the backside, we would be your owner's rep through the referendum process and guide you through that and be the district's representative on that side and oversee the project.
I think just looking down the line, like you said, one of the things I worry about, and I know that he had, Nate brought up the enrollment, and he would, think that might level off, but right now, we're looking at April 26th, we're gonna start seeing the effects of the devastating COVID lockdowns, which, let's not forget, everybody in Manitowoc here knows we've had a hospital close down their natal ward just because they weren't having babies. You know what I mean? So it's reasonable to expect that our enrollment, that's going to look like what we see is going to look like it was going up compared to what we're going to see. And that's just what I'm afraid of. And future plan, I think we need to at least keep that in mind. I don't know how that's.
On top of that too, you also identified there's a significant parochial. So
Right.
Market share is also another consideration about how are we doing to attract or are we losing market share?
Correct. It's damaged us in a way that's going to affect us for a long time. And I worry about that point in time because we're going to plan for this amount and these funds and this, that, and the other thing. But we get a lot of our funds through the enrollment. And I don't see it planning off. I see it doing one of these things right now and then right around April 26th going like this.
I think what you're getting at, the results of the space study will help you in that, and you'll see that you have quite a bit of extra space even as it stands.
Okay, one more question and then we really gotta move on, guys.
Okay, go
I'm
ahead.
gonna wear this very carefully. Have you done projects in the past where you reutilized library space to be more effective to the new times we are in?
Yes. A lot of it is small groups. And that's kind of where you can have the supervision and the safety side of it. We've done several IMCs just last summer where 3 of them, but they're like the big glass windows, where you can have several different groups doing small activities. It's more of the flexible furniture rather than the hard tables and the chairs, but making it more of like a coffee shop in some areas. And then in some areas you got your small groups, but absolutely there's some great opportunities there.
Because of the square footage that previously was used in the last decades to now, the square footage.
Yep.
It's obviously probably changing.
Yep, and you see all the bookshelves that are in the middle, and we don't need encyclopedias anymore because, and you do a cycle report, and you could put the books that actually get checked out around the perimeter, and there's all kinds of good stuff you can do because it'll open up a lot of space. But
Electrical outlets.
yes, lots of electrical outlets. We appreciate your time tonight. I know it was a ton of information, and it's a lot. But there's a lot here with your buildings. We appreciate your time. There'll be more to come. And if you guys have any questions, we're here and we'll be around.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. Look forward to seeing the finished report.
Okay, Angela, facilities budget options?
Yes, so wanted to take this opportunity to provide sort of a tie-in and to the presentation that they provided, just a budget update that fits both the vision of much of what they're talking about and just, just in general, a budget update as we start looking ahead at the 24-25 budget. So included in board book was a memo that explains some scenarios and options and then just the initial budget projection. We're really at a unique spot this year compared to other years where we're not working on a referendum, where we don't know at this time, if we'll have the approved dollars. And we also know what the state budget is. So that fills in a lot of gaps that we, had left as unknowns until very late last year. So when we've had discussions with CISA 10 about what our options are, we've talked about, working and looking at these projects that are coming up ahead that we're gonna wanna do in the short term. And with talking with Baird and the CISA 10 team talked about, what is kind of a target dollar amount that could, take care of some of the more low-hanging fruit and kind of get us started. So that's kind of what I targeted towards in this, in the memo. So currently, we have no debt as a school district. So, we'd have the options to really use our revenue limit authority as we have it right now in a flexible way because we're under levying quite a bit compared to what we planned. And then we could short-term borrow. And the main 2 differences that I covered in here is that, like, if you short-term borrow, you'd have debt for, 5, 10, years, a longer amount of time, but you could take care of a larger dollar amount of projects, so like $8 million or $15 million, okay? So then, but then you're limited with that payment over a period of time. And that, if we were to add a short-term borrowing on, that'd be about 1.5 million. We also really have the ability in the short term to take 1.5 million in just through our revenue limit authority and use that with Fund 46 to shift that and use that to work on some of the projects, which is a nice option for us. So it would eliminate the need to short-term borrow, avoid interest payments, and allow us to get working on some of the projects. So that, when I looked through that and wanted to project ahead, I've actually completed a projection 5 years out, but just to look at the snapshot of the next 2 years, if we would do that, we would, in just using estimates of value, we would be able to do that and slowly increase our mill rate overall, not have the sort of the massive change we had this year, but sort of ease into this. So one thing that the board is going to have to think about is if we want to tackle in the long term some large projects. When I was talking to Baird, if you're looking at 1 or 200 million, 300 million, you're looking at dollars on the mill rate. So that's where you know, if we utilize more of our revenue limit authority that we have through the increase per pupil and also through what we've estimated with the referendum, we can slowly ease into that. And then, you know, money that we would take off and put, say, into Fund 46 right now, just through utilizing our revenue limit authority, we would be able to, you know, drop that off and then slide that into a borrowing and sort of ease into that. And so for a taxpayer, you wouldn't have such a huge amount of shock when you would take on a large substantial borrowing coming down the road. So, so that's why I just modeled out the, you know, in the projection and wanted to share those, just share that with you guys so that you could see how that would look. You're always able to utilize fund balance, and that would be another option as well. And so what I did mainly in the modeling that I provided is added $1.5 million, but really that would be, we'd be closer to $2 million because we added through the vision of the referendum, you know, just modeling and everything, we added $500,000. So we already have that expanded in what we use for capital projects for the district. So, so we'd have, you know, a nice amount, and that seemed when we talked to CISA 10 just about a reasonable amount to tackle some of the projects that we would need to in the short term, and start to make some progress. So, you know, they had mentioned some of the projects too on here, that, you know, there are already some things in the plans that we have sort of budgeted for current existing Fund 46 dollars. The PAs in the schools is on the schedule for this next year, along with the phone systems. We also had E-rate funding. That's a part of this year's budget, where to support the hardwired and the wireless upgrades. So some of those things that were already mentioned are already in the works. So we really are technology infrastructure. You know, we've had, you know, it's not all installed right now, but that's really all set and ready to go. Where, you know, by the end of this summer, that will be in a much better spot compared to where it is now. And we received the funding for that. So, you know, just wanted to provide these initial budget projections. I also added some notes just in general about the budget, separate from the construction pieces, because there's always a lot of moving parts and the board's going to need to look at, you know, increase for all staff coming up soon, health insurance, all of those types of large items. And so those were included in the budget projection. So overall, adding this $1.5 million would be about a 36-cent increase compared to this year, as an example. If we had 4% equalized value, and then it would add like 61 cents the subsequent year. Again, that's just modeling and projecting ahead. Ultimately, the board always has the authority, and we can shape that however we would like to. On the initial budget projection, I did have at the way bottom, it's kind of hard to see just above the graph, with the budget for next year, we would be under levying about 500,000, and then less the next year. So it's, you know, we do have a little bit room for additional funding, but not a whole lot. So just wanted to share that with you guys, and make sure that you have that information. I'm happy to take any questions on that as well.
So we have, in our fund balance, we have about 20 million,
Yes, correct.
and that is in savings for a rainy day, an emergency.
Well, it's not necessarily in savings, so to say. It's, you know, your fund balance is always changing daily. So, and it varies throughout the year. So your aids come in at different years and you're spending money at different points. So you really want to keep enough in your fund balance to be able to cover your high and your low points of the year. So our low points are in this beginning of December, before aid payment comes in, and in June. And so right now, when I look at our collateralized deposits that come in daily, sometimes it'll get as low as $4 million at the low point. So, you know, we don't transfer money back and forth to what's called our LGIP account. So we have our Fund 46 funds in there, but we just keep them in our local account at Bank First. So, we're fortunate now, most districts have to short-term borrow or have a line of credit available just in case. So we always have to be able to pay our bills, and usually our accounts payable, our vouchers are around $7 to $8 million a month. So you have to keep all of those factors in mind. You know, we really could use, I put some information about the fund balance utilization. You know, we could use $3 to $4 million and be okay, but we wouldn't want to continue to do that and draw it all the way down. I hope that helps.
The rule of thumb typically is 3 months operations to 20%. That's approximately what the guide has been for schools. And then it's really to make sure that you've got plans to, in case something happens, that you can have some period of time to recover in terms of an alternative game plan if that's through something.
And if you short-term borrow, what kind of interest rates do you get on that?
Right now, it's between 4.5% to 5%.
So that's quite a bit more than county government can borrow for a lot less.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but
Yeah, about a month or so ago, that's what some of the rates were. Yes.
Out of these three options, and I'm sorry if I'm missing this, is there any one that you would recommend?
I would recommend option 2. Option 1 was short-term borrowing, we'd have interest, and we have it within our revenue limit authority right now. And that would leave just more room in general to add, you know, to ease us into getting some of the projects done and then prepare to take on a borrowing. And it just, we just, the main reason would be to avoid interest costs. We don't need to.
Angela, as you know, just clarification in terms of, you know, where this year we under levied because we had more dollars we could have levied up to, but we were trying to make sure we align with what we told our public we needed.
Correct,
And
yes.
then that's where we adjusted with just minor exception to that. So it would be, you know, putting more money into the fund.
Yes.
You know, to set some of that money just aside, you know, through
Yes.
this type of recognizing our facility needs are greater than we projected.
Yes, and when we came up to the referendum last year, we didn't know what we were gonna receive in
Sure.
state or the per pupil aid. You know, that was a huge thing. There were a lot of unknowns that were out there. And so Mike Clark said, you know, you as a district, many districts would just die to be in your spot right now because you have an operational referendum that covers you for 5 years and gives you great flexibility. So a lot of districts, when they have existing debt, will defease or do other creative things with just managing their debt and their mill rate to keep it nice and steady. Because we don't have that, that's one of the reasons we had that large fluctuation. And the thing with the Fund 46 option and moving into levying, you know, under levying not as much, is we would be able to put that money in Fund 46 and use it when we need it. So for example, let's say this summer we can only get going at $500,000 worth of projects, but we have 1.5 million that we want to take out of next year's budget. We can put that in Fund 46. You get aided on it when you transfer it over to that fund. And then we have that money growing interest, and LGIP right now is getting 5.39% the last time I checked. And so, you know, that's where we're collecting interest on funds like that too, that help us as well. So, so we have quite a bit of flexibility. That's another main reason I would suggest that. I hesitate with the fund balance always, but we have a healthy fund balance. So it's, you know, it's an option for one-time expenditures, but you don't want to get in the habit of continually drawing from it as a way to manage your finances.
So why wouldn't we do that? Or I guess why would you pick option 2 over option 3? It's not.
Oh, and you could do a combination of it as well, you know, depending upon how much projects, you know, or like if we wanted, we could just take out a fund balance and then it would keep our mill rate even lower. So it depends upon where the appetite for that is, you know, if we were to take on eventually a borrowing that would be let me see, and I didn't hold up here, 100 million to 300 million, we would be in the range of $1 to all the way up to $3 or $4 on the per thousand value, which is huge. I mean, that's, there's quite a range. So if we utilize our revenue limit authority and limit how much we under levy, we're able to slowly ease into it. So that's the main reason I would choose scenario 2.
Well, I'm just thinking that's probably inevitable, right? I mean, if we're gonna keep doing projects eventually, and again, I'm just thinking out loud, I think there's, some element of referendum fatigue and in general, tax fatigue, right, from the community. So if we could, maybe, and again, I'm just spitballing here and thinking out loud, but if we could maybe fund the first wave of projects through the fund balance, and then continue our work and diligence with student achievement and, hopefully continue to see some positive gains in that area. I think that strategically, that conversation with the community and that outreach becomes a lot easier when they see that we're making progress and, that we're trying to be practical about how we approach it. At least that's my thoughts.
I agree with you, but I'm also looking at it thinking, like you said, with all the projects that we want to do, option 2 and option 3, I see both of them being done soon. And right now, if we were to pass up, because like you said, what did it say? We under levied 3.1 million. Are we losing that if we don't choose that now?
No, the taxpayers are saving that.
Taxpayers are saving that, yes.
Us, the community is saving that.
I agree with that.
That's why we have to.
But are we losing the opportunity to draw from that? And the reason why I ask is because once we do utilize our fund balance and we bring it down to a point where we can't use it anymore, we're gonna have to go back and ask again. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, are we taking it?
Yeah,
I know what you're saying. I want to save it too. Trust me. Yes.
Guys.
Yes, please. Help.
As Biff said, he's been getting enough flack on the county board about school taxes going up.
Yep.
So I think we have to be very stewardess about how we present maxing out the tax levy amount. Because when does that hit us as taxpayers?
Well,
So say we take 3 more million out, does that hit us as a community next year?
we've lost our opportunity for that.
I would say no, to max out our levy.
Going into next year.
So every year with the budget cycle, you take that up as a board and we present that as an option. So this year, we under levied the $3.1 million. When you pass that up or when you under levy that, then you look at your budget next year. It's not like we have the option to bring in 3.1. You just have your full, you have your revenue limit of 30 for next year. So, and then why it's less, so next year, I'm not talking about it being 3.1. You also have your increased staffing expense, you have your other inflationary impacts. So it's a part of your larger project or a larger picture. So once you choose to under levy, you can't go back and recapture that.
Angela, with when we've talked about comparing ourselves with operating levy with the other districts. We haven't necessarily compared how we stand, except that we know we have no debt, but we haven't identified what's the average out there for debt that people are carrying and collected millage on.
Like the amount of debt payments, I don't have that right at hand right here, but most districts will always have a debt payment. So our debt payment until we paid it off this last spring was around $1 million. So, and that was school board approved debt. So the school board has an authority to, like, even if we did the short-term borrowing, it wouldn't be referendum that, it would just be within the school board. School board could say, we are going to do this amount. So. I do have data on that and I can bring that to the board if you guys would like that. Yes.
On the short-term lending, can we short-term lend on the payment of 1.5 million a year? So we could borrow 15 million and then you're just talking about the payments.
Yes, that's the way I approached
Okay,
it.
that's how I read it. I want to
Yes.
hear how you're explaining that to the board.
Angela, when would we have to make some decision on what we want to do here?
Well, the ultimate decision, you know, we should continue this discussion. We need to talk as an exec team. Getting the results of the facility study is really critical. You know, ultimately, it's like summer comes, but then we pass the budget in October, but we have to know where we're generally.
So for example, talking about a referendum, that we considered a referendum was important for going to next year, we still have to think, what are we doing in these next 2 years? And that's a little bit what we're talking about. What are we gonna do in the short term? I mean, we don't have to go for a referendum next year. We could go a year after if we feel this is needed. It depends on how much conversation we need to do, but the longer you stretch it out, then the more you have to be saying, what are you doing here? And is it fitting your long-term vision? I mean, so it's really challenged me because we have unfortunately neglected this. Many districts have debt, and what happens is they're always looking to replenish that.
Yes.
Because as time goes on, your facilities are aging, and we used to have short-term issues, and we'd be finishing major work, and as it was ready to drop off, we were going back out, you know, to another series. We don't have that. You know, so strategic, we haven't thought about how to maintain our facilities, and now we're having to deal with that now. So without having that in place, it's not like a renewal where the taxpayer doesn't see an increase. They see an increase when you go for a referendum when you haven't had this.
Any other questions at all? Thank you guys for, I appreciate it. I think it's good information for us to consider as we move forward here, so.
Thanks for the consideration for this update.
Thank you for aligning the presentation with the financials. Makes very much more sense than how it's been presented in the past.
Okay, the JFK track proposal recommendation is next on our list.
Right?
Yep.
Thanks, Mike. Why don't you have a seat up here,
Dietrich sent
Mike?
this with us, an inspirational piece of the JFK track, if you'd like to see this.
Oh, very nice.
It's very attractive green color. It's to the test of time. It's about a little younger than myself.
There's a fundraiser, we could sell that.
Yeah, no kidding.
Pieces of the track.
You know what, Stacy, I had not thought about that, so that is definitely.
Well, I mean, they did it with Lambeau Field, they did it with, Notre Dame even was selling pieces of sod on the old field, I'm like, good lord.
Tiger Stadium did that when they were,
So,
or Ring
anyway.
Stadium, I'm not sure where.
Oh, an opportunity.
Yes.
So we, just had for the board, we went to RFP for the track, and we, started talking about the track more in depth last spring and collected preliminary quotes, but for our purchasing policy, this is over $100,000 going to run through the official bidding process to get this taken care of for the JFK track. It's the current track that's in there right now, 40 years old, and it's stood the test of time. Its life is complete. It's lived a good life. So ironically, what we're proposing is the same company and the same product that is in there now. It's worked well for us. It's been a very good product, and so Kiefer is the option that we're proposing. And the timeline for the project is that it would be installed in April. We're trying to make sure that it would be kind of done in a window of time where we can have gym classes outside. We can ensure that it would be complete by graduation if it would have to be inside, and we always hope it's outside. And it's a very high quality product. Mike and Stan went up and looked at Green Bay Pebbles, theirs, and it's 10 years old and is held up very well. I'll turn it over to you if you'd like to.
Yeah, we talked to the couple of the staff up there in the gymnasium area. I noticed right away when I stepped on that floor how cushiony it was, so there was a lot of life to it, and it's 10 years old already. And they've had no problems with theirs at all. We noticed a little bit of, with the bleachers net coming out, we saw some scuff marks on there, but nothing bad at all, nothing wearing through. We're getting a little bit more of that over at the JFK now because the track is rolling up, and it's really, that one set of bleachers behind you, Biff, there, it doesn't come out straight anymore. But because we're really fighting this right now. So it's causing more problems, and those drive wheels are digging right through the track down to the concrete right now. So that was a concern of ours, like, is that gonna happen with the new track also? But we've had the inspections done by Weimer out of Milwaukee, and they said everything's operating fine right now. So the track looked great up there. We've got some renderings on it for colors and all of that. I called today, and some of the questions on the black flooring, it would be, we're worried about the salt tracking and all that coming off out of the front there. So they're gonna give us answers on that, and we've got some time to make a decision on colors yet also. But we're trying to get into their window for putting it in. I talked to them today. I haven't talked to you. It looks like April's gonna be out for us to get that done. So we've got to get it done in that May window, and they're saying they can do that yet. So I'm also on a site with all of the other buildings and grounds community throughout the state of Wisconsin, and that question just came up. Somebody's looking at what track are they going to put in, and Kiefer came up a lot. This Mondo product is the one that was highly recommended by everyone. And I'll just say the only thing that negative that I saw on all of the comments was I think it was Muskego. They didn't get there on time. And they had to really push them, but that's just typical construction. You see that all the time, everywhere. We just have to stay on them and get their promise and keep forcing. But they said ultimately it got done and it was a great product. That's how they ended their statement. So
The Banon at the end there, the one that was more money, when it says remove old track and replace, are we removing, or is that gonna be part of our cost with Kiefer?
that is in the Kiefer cost
It is,
they are
okay.
removing.
Okay,
They basically sand the floor so
Okay.
you get a good bond with the glue.
okay.
And in the renderings, it looks like a gray, but it is a black.
It's a black.
It
yes.
just, that didn't come out.
But
So
you're
that's-
still questioning that regarding the salt in terms of the appearance, in terms of what that might.
He was gonna make some phone calls to where they have installed the black already, and he was gonna ask them
Okay.
how the maintenance has been on it.
Any other questions anybody has?
Are you good with the mill for lifespan compared to the 8.5?
Yes.
10
We
more
talked to
years,
Preble.
20 more years?
What's that?
30 more years? Biff got the question statements.
I'm like, I'm lost.
And it'd be paid for out of Fund 46. That's where it was, as a part of approving the budget, you essentially approve the expenditure, but we wanted to still bring the official bid here to the board.
And anything that might come up as far as, you know, how we're always talking construction, when you start digging stuff up, are we, do we have something in the contract about overruns costs that we might go over our 375? How do they typically handle that? Are we anticipating any?
We are not really
Not
anticipating.
anticipating any of that.
Okay.
We're gonna do a little bit by putting some electrical in the floor.
Yeah,
We'll cut that in, and we're gonna do that now, so that's gonna add a few $1,000s to that, but just trying to get it where it belongs.
Are you good with the square footage of not just the track, but the other areas as well? With
Did
doing
they,
it all or doing some of it, or are you,
we need to do all of it,
okay,
yes, and that square footage matches
okay.
what we've got.
Make sure that,
Yep.
any other questions at all before we?
Sounds like that low quote you guys just aren't comfortable with from Basement Brothers.
Yeah, with them, we talked to Basement and talked to their, just their references. The product that they have is usually used for an outdoor track. And just if you would think of just your more generic version of the Mondo, and the Mondo's product that's been in there has been so good. And just to the test of time, that's where we felt more comfortable with that.
When Stan and I went up to Green Bay, we were going to stop in Kiwani because Basement put Kiwani on as a reference. We thought, well, that'll be an easy trip. We called Kiwani and they don't have that product in there at all, so I don't know where the reference came. We can't find anybody that has this in.
And it's a longer warranty. It's a 10-year warranty, so the additional costs, we felt it was just a better product overall. We've had that proof of that through having it ourselves over this time, and the warranty was a key factor as well.
It's a good question, I just don't know
So is it,
where to look.
do we vote on this or not?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'd look for a motion to approve. Chris?
So I just have one thing before
Sure,
that.
yeah.
Certainly, I know this is the templated contract. You might want to, if you are really concerned about it being done in case we need the JFK for graduation, certainly a standard thing in government for construction is to have writers for, this is the window you have, and if you go over that, there are penalties that accrue. And I can't believe that they haven't had this percent required, that so that you don't have to get. I think you give them a reasonable window, but, you know, have a drop dead date. That's all. Oh, then I'll move to accept it.
Okay. With the addition of that information that you said?
Well, no, I'm just suggesting they try to get that because that's a pretty common thing.
Okay, all right. And second?
I'll second.
Okay, go ahead, whoever. Tony did.
Tony? Okay, all right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Very good, guys. Exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, so now we have some first reads of policy revisions. We'll start off with policy 2105, mission of the district. Anybody have, I'll look for a motion to it and second to approve that.
Yeah, move.
Okay, a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion, any changes? Yes, Chris?
Yeah, I because I don't understand why it's in there, I would ask for the removal of "and citizens." Because it says meet the educational needs of its students and citizens. And we are here specifically to educate students and help them become students. But the mission of the district is not to educate the general citizen. That'd be my
Okay.
response.
Thoughts about that?
I would support that. I don't know, do we have any classes or do we do any?
Yeah, I don't see
I
it.
mean, my hope is that the kids that we educate become good citizens in our community.
The only thing I'm thinking is because we're a public school, and I'm thinking like when we were, when I did some work at UW Manitowoc, and, you know, because it's a public school, you know, they had educational classes for citizens, and so I don't know if that, and that's all I can think of
I
is
don't think
that.
we do. I mean, that was.
We don't, I just
basically
wondered if that's
extensions.
why that's in there.
Sometimes there's a community service fund as a part of what a district has, and we don't have that as a district.
Got it, okay. So if we did remove it, it would not be a big deal.
I'd like to make a friendly addition to that. If we were to remove the X on and student citizens, I would say that we need to change the needs of our students. I don't know. Removing citizens. I can't see it.
Lee, can you speak to that at all? I guess.
Yeah, taking out "and citizens" would not be a big deal. It doesn't require you to educate citizens. It merely keeps it as an option if you wanted to run a vocational type program where you did offer night classes for some reason and involve community members. We do not currently have that right now. So it wouldn't change anything if it was removed.
I'm all for educating citizens.
Yep.
It's just not something that we
You don't do it now.
It's not our mission.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the current policy that would remove "and citizens." Do we have a second to that amendment?
I second it, but I'd like to add, are we supposed to keep with the needs? I don't like the needs of its, is that correct grammatically?
Sure.
or our students? I mean, it's a mission statement, I guess.
One is possessive.
Our,
I think it's one and the same, yeah.
Yeah.
It's because what it's referring to is the MPSD,
Right.
which would be considered an it.
got it. I'm okay with that.
That's really what.
Okay, so we have a first and a second with the amendment. Any further discussion on that?
So there's no downside on taking that and citizens out?
No.
You could always add it
You
back.
could always add it back in if you wanted to. And frankly, you can do programming for community without it in there, as it is a mission statement.
Right, that's the mission statement.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay, Matt Phipps.
They're so there.
I like the word citizen.
Okay, the next item here is management and restructuring and school improvement. First reading on this. Do I have a motion and a second to approve? Chris? Yes.
I think you may have just amended that policy, but maybe not have,
We have to,
you may have to
Oh,
pass it on to the second reading.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you so
You're
much. I appreciate it.
Well, we can't amend it.
You now just need a motion.
Right.
Or you actually already have the motion. You didn't vote on it yet.
So we had a motion to
Amend.
to move it to the second
Correct.
reading. We had a second
Correct.
to do that. So all those in favor of moving it to the second reading, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Lee.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now we have the management restructuring. Chris Abel
I did.
made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Piff. Okay, any discussion regarding the management restructuring policy? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those to go to the second reading signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, our next one is our reading instructional goals and kindergarten assessment. I would look for a motion and a second to approve the policy to go to the second reading.
So moved.
So moved by Biff, seconded by Chris. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. We're going to go on to the summer or interim session school policy. I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve. Okay, Chris?
Sure.
And a second?
Second.
Second by Biff. Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of moving it to the second read signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, the next is the selection of instructional materials and equipment. Do I have a motion and a second to approve? Chris? Second? Biff? Okay. And any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Move to the second reading. The next one is the educational opportunity for military children. And do I have a motion and a second to approve? Motion by Matt Phipps. Seconded?
Second.
Second by Chris Abel. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The next is our entrance age policy. I'd look for a motion and a second to approve.
So moved.
So moved by Viv, second.
A second.
Second by Chris. Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. And then the next goes to just our introduction to suggested policy revisions. These are the ones that we'll be looking at next time around at the first reading in our general meeting in February. Okay. So other business. One of the questions I was, so they presented it at the conference. Did you, Carrie, did you go to the presentation on enrollment by chance?
I did not.
Okay, okay. So I wondered with our conversation that we had tonight, so the person that put that on is you often hear about the Marquette polling that's done. And they did a presentation on enrollment. And I have the slides for that. It's very interesting about just the feelings about education and also what's going on in our state.
Oh, you mean public perceptions?
Public perceptions, it
Yeah,
goes into
I went
that.
to that one.
Yeah, and was it the person from the Marquette School
Yeah,
that put it
Charles
on?
Franklin,
Yeah,
Charles Franklin.
yeah, Charles Franklin. So it was probably the very same one that I went to in the fall.
Okay.
But I'm wondering if the board would want to see those slides, and so you can hear what's going on in the state, because they also talk about perception, but he also talked about Wisconsin having a real big problem of people leaving our state.
Oh, yeah.
So I think when we're talking about forecasting, I think sometimes we get caught up into that, you know, it's not all that we're doing something wrong here, that people are leaving our school. There's a big proportion too of people leaving our state, and we're getting older and older
Yeah.
and not having babies.
Yeah.
And we're filing count tomorrow, so we're just finishing that, and that's on the February agenda where we talk about the enrollment. So like, I have the projections for the next 10 years.
Oh,
It's
excellent.
also included in the modeling that I had, so then, I mean, we can.
Super.
Yeah, so
Put that in there
and
with it.
actually open enrollment survey data is back as well, so.
Okay.
I think that whole thing would be good for the board to see.
Yeah, so I will get you guys the slides for
Yeah.
that. Because I just think it just shows kind of what we're up against, you know, as a district, you know, even from a state level, so. All right, so I will get that to you. Other than that, we have our general meeting coming up in February, and that's all I would have. Oh, yeah, thank you. So, you know, we talked initially about the legal update that we have with the MPSD board professional development, where we've had the WASB attorney come. These are the dates that have been presented
From a period of 4 to 6.
from a period of
2 hours left.
4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. So this would be March 4th, March 6th, the 20, are these all, what days
These
of
are
the week?
these,
Are they all the same or?
no, they're not.
Okay, March 4th, March 6th,
That's just availability.
okay, the 20th, the 25th, and the 27th. You said spring break is part of that? I mean, Mike, what, they both look out. What is our spring break week this year?
Just shut my computer.
Oh, sorry.
It's the last week of March.
Okay, Lori's got it here.
It is March 25th through the 29th.
Okay.
Some of us still hang them up. Or some of us still use encyclopedia. Check.
Okay, so does anybody have preference, conflicts? I think since we want our staff to be here, I think the 25th and the 27th are out. So that looks at March 4, 6, and 20.
So what days are those?
Those are Wednesdays, are you?
The Wednesdays?
Are you talking about for the board meetings in March? Is that what you're?
This
This
would
is for a
be
special
just for that
professional
special,
development,
where the lawyer would come in, wouldn't be necessary, well, it would be a,
Oh,
be a
that,
meeting.
okay. Yeah.
but that would be the only thing on the agenda, is it's just to,
If we have the 4th and the 5th or the 6th, it would be not a week where we had a regular meeting.
Would that be here or where would that be at?
Yeah.
What we're planning on, and, you know, we want to invite the public, you know, so that they're aware of this, even though some could be in attendance in person or remote. We would have it here unless somehow we get expressed interest. We'd like to be able to sit in and watch this so that they can learn, so right now I would say we start here. And then see in terms of if it's just what we typically get, that's what we would be here and holding it here.
And if I understood you right earlier, that would be like a regular meeting intended to educate the board?
It's kind of almost like a retreat specifically to understand the legal update, from the school board attorney, primarily unless there's other interest. And we'll share if there's interest in learning about some other area. But what I saw is Title IX and First Amendment and those issues that are falling under there.
So,
Obviously, we don't use table 2 policies on that, in terms
So
of what are those issues.
the 4th is a Monday, the 6th is a Wednesday, and then the 20th is a Wednesday as well.
So the 4th is an option too, you're saying?
Yes, March 4th, 6th, or the 20th.
Are we making a date now,
Do it
or
on
are
the
we just
6th.
pulling those dates over right now?
No, we
lock
wanna
it in
know.
as soon
We
as
wanna lock
possible.
it
That's
in
what's
now.
available right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so the 6th,
He's already filled for.
March 6th, March
That's
6th,
fine.
March 6th,
I just want to pick one so we can get to the cake.
right?
Yeah, that would be good.
Ethan's 100 years old today. I'm expecting cake at this meeting.
Oh.
Lee?
Yeah.
He's in charge.
Somebody
I forgot
There was sheet cake at Lincoln today.
Yep.
Oh.
There was cookies.
My daughter had some, but I didn't.
I would
Did
say
you-
that's a favorite. Call me on this.
Were you?
Tell me about it.
All right. March 6th, 4 to 6.
Cake.
4 to 6, March 6th. Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so,
Yes.
They don't appreciate it like I do.
what's that?
Aren't we paying him? He can't come in?
All my life, it's rough.
Oh, we're not paying them.
We're not paying him. We are paying, yeah, we are paying.
Yeah, it's,
They're missionaries.
the School Board Association, Michigan, the Wisconsin School Board Association does this all the time, where they will contract with individuals for any type of professional development or whatever. So he's submitting that information out. They're typically reasonable relative
They're
to,
like the Salvation Army and
because
education.
they're part of your association, so.
Well, I worry when it's a lawyer. They like to charge by the hour.
Okay, so we are going to move to closed session to consider the employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the government body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. This meeting is authorized pursuant to section 19.85 subsection 1C of the Wisconsin statutes and to discuss superintendent evaluation progress, goals, and objectives. So I would need a motion and a second to move into closed session. Chris, Abel, and second? Okay, and then we do need a roll call vote. That was you, second by, yeah.
Christopher Abel,
Aye.
Nick Hansen,
Aye.
Matthew Phipps,
Aye.
Stacy Seldner,
Aye.
Matthew Spalding, Carrie Trask, Tony Vostelka.
Okay, it's 8:08 and we are now in closed session.
Say it, I'm gonna email.
I think we're reconvening. We're not.
I know a lot of people said we didn't. We did, even yes, the last time, but